So we're now recording this meeting so that anybody who hasn't wasn't able to attend is going to be able to check this out later on in case it's useful for them. But what we're going to be talking about today is related to a research brief that was commissioned by one of our school division partners. And sort of part of the philosophy of MERC is whenever we engage in research with one or multiple of our school division partners, we think it's important to share and open access as much as possible because other schools and divisions across Virginia and across the country can benefit from the research as well. And so just really grateful to everybody from our school divisions who was able to join. And we have folks from school divisions outside of MERC, which is great too. And it looks like most of the people in this room have attended a MERC seminar before. And for those who are new to MERC seminars, welcome. We're excited to have you here. For the structure of how we typically do these is we'll share some of our findings related to this research and policy brief that we've done titled Emerging Issues and Innovations in Public PK-12 Education that specifically focuses on implications for strategic planning in PK-12 spaces. We're going to talk through findings related to that from the literature, from our analysis of Virginia and National School Division strategic plans, and an analysis of Google Trends that Ed and Lisa, who are on the call, have conducted as well. So that's what our plan is for the day. And I'll briefly introduce myself. My name is David Knapp. I'm the director of the Metropolitan Educational Research Consortium, and I'm also an assistant professor in the Department of Foundations of Education in the School of Education at VCU. And I have two amazing co-presenters with me today, and I'll let Lisa introduce herself first.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, David. My name is Lisa Gwynn. A little bit about me. I have almost 30 years experience in the educational field. I started working in preschools, then I worked in K-12 systems as a paraprofessional, a teacher, an academic advisor, a school improvement coordinator, and a school board member. Not all at once, but throughout my time there. And then for the last 9 years, I've been working in higher education, primarily in community colleges. And I am also a current doctoral student in VCU's School of Education and Higher Ed Leadership Program.
Thanks, Lisa. And Fred?
Thanks, Dr. Knapp. Hi, everyone. My name is Fred Getty. I am also a doctoral student at VCU's School of Education. I'm a leadership development consultant. I have a boutique consulting firm that I run. I've had the honor of participating in a couple MERC projects with Dr. Knapp. So it's exciting to be a part of this. I consider myself a learning enthusiast, so any opportunity to learn and share my knowledge towards the field of education is always welcome. So nice to be here and looking forward to exploring this together.
Thanks, Fred. And Lisa and Fred did some really interesting work with Google Trend analysis that we're going to be digging into today. Quickly, I just wanted to share this resource document that I've put into the chat just to give you a quick tour of what's included in here. Anytime we have a seminar, we always include a resource document because we hope that the conversation is going to live beyond just the seminar and that you can access additional resources from here on. So the MERC Research and Policy Brief is linked here. It's available for public access and download there. You can access the slides here in PDF form, so feel free to click that in case you'd like to follow along with the slides or share them with anybody in your networks. The slides that I'm going to share have all kinds of fancy transitions. This is just a PDF form that just gets right to the meat of the information. Our contact information here in case you want to follow up, and then we're going to have a group discussion component of this where we're actually going to talk about emerging issues that we're facing in different school divisions across Virginia. And then some different strategies for addressing them. And so whenever we get to that stage, Lisa's going to walk us through that, but this is how you're going to be able to access those documents. And then these are just several resources related to MERC with our other research briefs. Our MERC Summit is on Thursday, June 13th at Tomahawk Creek Middle School in Chesterfield County Public Schools. So if you enjoyed the seminar and want to hang out with us for an entire day and we'll feed you lunch, come to our seminar. We would love to have you. We have a MERC podcast. We have other MERC seminars. And then we also have evaluation and consulting services through our newly launched Institute for Collaborative Research and Evaluation in the VCU School of Education that MERC is part of. So just want to encourage you to check out those resources as well. But let's hop into this conversation. And again, we're talking about emerging issues and innovations in public education, but it's really in the through the lens of strategic planning, because this is how this was commissioned, is we had school divisions who were engaging in new strategic planning efforts in a new cycle. And they wanted to know what other school divisions are thinking about for their strategic planning and what the literature says for this. And then what are some of the things that we need to be focusing on with strategic planning in terms of trends and analysis for public education. So we're going to start this with a conversation about strategic planning, but eventually transition into just what are some of the big topics that are we're seeing as a key focus areas in public education, and then we'll conclude with some key takeaways to consider. So let's talk about this in terms of strategic planning first of all. So start by asking this question: why do school districts engage in strategic planning? Well, at the policy level, the Code of Virginia makes it very clear that each local school board shall adopt a division-wide comprehensive unified long-range plan that's based on data collection, analysis of the data, and how the data is going to be utilized to improve classroom instruction and student achievement. And there's additional guidance in this code that indicates things like the strategic plans are supposed to be updated biannually. So even though strategic plans are typically a 5-year plan, the expectation is to continue to revisit this. And if COVID taught us anything, is that things can change immediately, right, in school divisions. So it's important to continue to revisit what's included in the strategic plan and make updates as necessary. So why is it important for school districts to engage in routine strategic planning? First is that schools and communities are navigating enduring and emerging issues that impact their students, staff, and families. So some of the issues that you see in strategic plans are things that are enduring across years, but there's also new things that emerge. For example, artificial intelligence. How do you respond to that? That makes sense to be incorporated into strategic plans as well. But also there's new innovations that come out, there's new technologies that come out, there's new evidence-based strategies that emerge for supporting the needs of school constituents for students, families, and staff members. And so it's important that those get reflected in strategic plans. And so considering these things, strategic planning really needs to focus on emerging issues and innovations in public education. And that's why we ended up commissioning this or writing this research brief that covers these topics. And this is available in the resource document in case you'd like to access it on your phone. Here's a QR code where you can scan it quickly. But we're going to walk you through the key findings from this report. Anything that we talk about, in case you're interested in learning more, you can actually dig into the details of it in the report. And there's lots of hyperlinks in there, so you can dig into the peer-reviewed research, but also some links to the other resources that we access and data sources, for example. And this report is really structured to answer 3 questions. How do K-12 school systems engage in strategic planning? What are the priorities, goals, and strategies that are in strategic plans across Virginia and the country? So our analysis of that, what does that reveal? And then what are trends in public K-12 education that school districts need to consider in their strategic plans? And started by answering this question, what did we do for this? We looked at peer-reviewed research that's been published since 2022. We specifically tried to focus on literature that focused explicitly on how K-12 school districts engage in strategic plans and trying to focus on this in America as much as possible. And that revealed very little literature. So people surprisingly don't write very much about this. So in case this is something you're interested in, there's an opportunity to publish more research in this area. And also, we were looking at literature that was exploring rationale and strategies for strategic planning in these K-12 school systems across the country, and it only revealed 11 articles that met those criteria. So it's very specific criteria, but the research that we're going to be summarizing here is specific to PK-12 and it's most current, that's published since 2022. For the strategic plan review, what we did is we pulled strategic plans for all school divisions across Virginia, as well as the top 25 largest school districts across the country. So like Los Angeles, Philadelphia, Fairfax is technically one of the largest school districts across the country as well, but was already included in the Virginia analysis. And then we focused on all strategic plans that had that their plans were expiring 2026 or later. So we wanted to make sure that we were focusing on ones that were had a little bit more staying power in terms of like when they were actually initiated and how long they were going to last. And then we did a manual thematic analysis of the overall priority areas, the goals and the strategies. And then we also did a follow-up AI analysis using ChatGPT. So we're going to share the results of both of those analyses. And then what trends in public K-12 education should school divisions consider in their strategic plans? This is a Google trend analysis that was led by Lisa and Fred. It's looking at news trends and searches. We have charts and summaries in this report. And we're going to talk through those at the end of this presentation. I would say no peaking yet. So take a look at those trends yet, because Fred and Lisa are going to talk you through those. I'll be curious to see what people are predicting for those. And then, considering all this evidence together, we offer some key takeaways and implications for school district strategic planning. So let's get in first about how do K-12 school systems engage in strategic planning. And I'll go through these kind of quickly because it's really just intended to be foundational. And then I want us to really get into the heart of our analysis to see how it resonates with your work. And so, first of all, what are the key elements of strategic plans? Based off of the literature, they typically include mission and vision statement. They have a clear structure, typically that's organized by priority areas. So whenever I'm talking about focus of priority areas, that's the broadest areas that are offering structure to a strategic plan. They have an emphasis on academic as well as non-academic goals. They almost always include academic goals, but it's also important to focus on social emotional learning, mental health support, staffing, things like that. And then they offer strategies and then delineation of responsibilities. So all these things are supposed to be clearly articulated in a strategic plan. How do they engage their stakeholders? And this is part of the Code of Virginia. It's expected that in terms of strategic planning for school divisions, you should really be engaging your stakeholders. The goal is to foster understanding and garner support, so making sure that you're engaging with stakeholders to get their input on the strategic planning process. This includes public surveys, focus groups, community meetings. We've been having some ongoing meetings and supports with Richmond Public Schools right now, who's going through their strategic planning process, and they have a series of town hall meetings and small and large group meetings for their Dreams for RPS strategic plan that's been really interesting to be a part of. You want to make sure there's diverse representation of voices in the stakeholder engagement, that it's representative of the community that you're serving in the school system, and that there's strong leadership and team to support team support in the schools. So whenever the strategic plan is getting actually implemented in schools, making sure that there's strong infrastructure within the schools, that they understand the why behind the strategic plan. So that's why stakeholder engagement is really important. In terms of deciding what to include in the strategic plan, it's typically based off of a careful review of relevant data. That could be academic data and otherwise, but school districts, as you know, you're swimming in data. There's all this data that you have from students that can inform your decisions around this, but also there could be primary data in the form of like surveys, focus groups, things like that. It's an opportunity to reflect on current district strengths and weaknesses. It's typically based off of conversations with stakeholders to help establish consensus about what should be included in the strategic plan. So making sure that this goes through the school board, through the community, that it's very clear that everybody's on board with what should be included in the strategic plan. And that you can consider current events that illuminate issues and innovation. So your former strategic plan shouldn't entirely represent or resemble what your new strategic plan is, because things are changing. Right? So there's going to be new events that need to be addressed, new issues, new innovations that need to be incorporated. Typical focus areas, so the broader focus areas that you'll typically see in strategic plans according to the research include academic achievement and growth. That's the most common. Focus areas related to diversity, equity, or inclusion, social emotional learning, and mental health. Mental health is increasingly popular in some of these literature review or in some of these strategic plans, especially post-COVID. And they're recruiting and retaining a strong and diverse workforce. So a lot of times these are kind of the broader buckets that you'll see strategic plans in terms of their focus or priority areas. Measuring progress for the strategic plan requires reflecting on new and existing data, integrating the strategies into daily routines. So the strategies that are articulated, anything that could be integrated into daily routines already. So it's not one more thing for folks in our schools to have to do, but something that's kind of building off of existing practices or streamlining existing practices. Promoting sustainable improvements, so making sure that it's something that's actually going to last over time. And then offering follow-up assessments on innovations, these different strategies that are being implemented, so you know that it's actually working. And again, with MERC and the ICRE, we have some resources related to that we'd be happy to help. And then applying the plan. So it's important to establish shared definitions and parameters. Even for the activity that we're going to be doing today, we have shared definitions that we're going to be working off of, so everybody's kind of familiar that we're working from the same page. Articulate the priority areas for strategies, and then making sure that you stress collaboration, sharing, and trust, and then providing a thorough operational framework for staff so it's very clear how to actually implement the plan. Make sure that it's a living document that reflects the values of the school system, but also how do you actually implement it? What are the strategies? Who's going to be responsible for them? And then importantly, we looked at research that was focused on how do you actually navigate change, especially in times of crisis. And for this, we pulled in a little bit of literature that even extended beyond to K-12. It's important to treat a strategic plan as a living document. You want to be inclusive and transparent in the process for updates. So the Code of Virginia says that strategic plans should be reviewed biennially. Anytime that there's going to be changes that are made, it needs to be transparent and with input from the community of why and how it's going to be updated. Adapting the changing needs of the workforce. And we're going to talk about this later on with the Google Trends in terms of workforce and schools and how that's changed, especially relative to COVID-19. There's a need to be adaptive in that sense. And then an essential focus on caring for students, families, and staff for their emotional, physical safety and well-being as well. So those are some of the things, like as some of these new challenges emerge, keeping the well-being of our constituents at the center of it is very important. So those are some of the kind of like key things to consider in terms of strategic planning foundationally. And considering that, that's helpful for understanding how we approach our analysis of the priorities, goals, and strategies and strategic plans across Virginia and the country. And so in terms of our methodology for this, we looked at strategic plans for 132 school divisions across Virginia, pulled those together, and then the top 25 largest school divisions across the country. And then again, we focused on 2026 or later, and that narrowed it down the 61 school divisions that had strategic plans that were expiring in 2026 or later, and then 7 school districts across the country that had that same frame. And in terms of hierarchically, what this looks like when we're talking about priorities, that's the broadest area. So priorities or focus areas is the broadest category we'll talk about. And then there's typically sharply articulated goals that are aligned with those priorities. And then there's specific strategies that are very itemized and more granular that help you accomplish those goals relative to those priority areas. And a lot of this is probably information that folks that are on the Zoom are familiar with. I think it's helpful to kind of establish that hierarchy because it's also going to help inform the conversations that we're going to have later. So what are the priorities? So these are the broadest of the strategic plans that we reviewed, that we did a manual analysis and then AI. So I'm going to throw up a table here and just kind of show you when these showed up. So these percentages that are on the right indicate the percentage of districts where the focus of priority area that's listed was one of their priority areas. And so you'll notice, I'll just highlight these in green. So anything that was represented, at least half of the districts are highlighted in green, and then anything that's represented in less than a quarter of the districts are highlighted in orange down here at the bottom. You can see academics understandably represented as a focus area for 100% of the districts. Staff was the next most common for recruiting, retaining, and training of quality staff. Relationships, so like relationship building or outreach with families and communities, and then social, physical, or emotional wellness, creating safe and healthy environments was represented in roughly half of the districts in terms of their broadest focus areas. College career and life readiness was only in about 1/5 of school districts in terms of their priority areas, but that also clearly overlaps with academics, for example. And then our AI analysis of this really reinforced some of these things that we were noticing in our manual thematic analysis. That these school districts are focusing on academic achievement, equity, inclusivity, community and family engagement, professional development and talent management, operational efficiency, and then continuous improvement. And then when we drill down to the goals in terms of our analysis, here's what we found. So again, same kind of analysis here in terms of percentage of districts. What was represented in at least 50% of the districts was highlighted in green. 100% of the districts had goals that were sharply articulated, specifically related to academic performance and their relationship to social, physical, and emotional wellness and innovative teaching, that there were goals specifically related to that. The 5 C's being represented as a specific goal in only 25% of the school districts, I think is interesting, because as you're probably aware, the 5 C's are an element of the profile of a new Virginia high school graduate, right? So it's critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, and citizenship. In terms of specific goals that align with those, we only found it in 25% of the school district strategic plans that we reviewed. I also think that it's really interesting that there were specific goals related to staffing for recruiting and retaining quality staff in less than 40% of the districts that we reviewed, but it was a very common priority area. So that suggests that there might be some misalignment there between actually saying that this is a priority and articulating specific strategies to actually be able to address it. And then our AI analysis of goals showed some similar themes around academic achievement, equity and inclusivity, goals related to safe and supportive schools, and community partnerships, like MERC, for example, organizational effectiveness, and then expansion of technology. Then finally, drilling down into the strategies, what are some of the strategies that we focused on here? So what our team did for this, instead of pulling every single strategy that was included in the strategic plan, because there's typically dozens that were included, what we did instead is we just asked our team to identify what are the strategies that you thought were most interesting or innovative. And we had a team of several doctoral students in the VC School of Education who were working on this, and we all kind of collaborated on this point. So what were some of the strategies that really stood out to us? In terms of community partnerships, establishing partnerships with community service boards, for example, that was something that we noticed showing up in some of the strategic plans, and that's something that we know happens in the MERC region, especially for mental health support. Stakeholder outreach, including things like having a way of tracking interactions, prioritizing outreach to underrepresented groups in that outreach. In terms of curriculum, there's some focus on early childhood education, making sure that curriculum was culturally responsive as well. And the college and career included work-based learning requirement. If you're interested in work-based learning, this is a big initiative across the state with the Virginia Talent Opportunity Partnership. There's implications for PK-12 and higher education and work-based learning supporting organizations. And we recently published a literature review that really digs into all of those. So if you're interested, let me know and we can share those resources. It's available on the MERC website as well. Additional strategies that we thought really stood out for the social emotional learning piece. There were school divisions that described strategies for actually embedding the 5 Ps into the curriculum that we thought was useful. Research-based practices, so evaluation of professional development. I've heard this before in terms of feedback from some of the school districts we've worked with, is that like PD will be offered, but it's not always clear if it's evidence-based or if it's being effective in the way that it's actually moving the needle for whatever outcomes are of interest for school district personnel who are participating. So making sure that they're offering research-based professional development, for example. Faculty and staff recruitment, some innovative strategies were around recruiting veterans, retirees, and career switchers. I know we've had some focus on that in the VC School of Education, for example. And in terms of assessment, there was a big push for formative assessment to promote growth mindset for students. So not just summative assessment, but also formative assessment. And then just a few more here in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. There were some school districts that talked specifically about multilingual family outreach and promoting student voice. We know that there's growing populations of multilingual learners in some of our school districts, and so this was something that was showing up in some of the district plans, for example. In terms of technology, it included providing virtual learning opportunities, especially post-COVID. There's folks on this call that we know are overseeing virtual learning opportunities for their school districts, and that was something that was popping up in some of the strategic plans that we saw. And then safety and wellness. For example, there was mention of the use of restorative practices as an alternative discipline method in schools. So those are just some of the strategies that stood out to us. But again, the report digs into those in further detail in case you'd like to learn more and read more about what it is that our school districts across Virginia are engaging in terms of their strategies. All right, and then our AI analysis of the strategies revealed a lot of those same things. A lot of it was process related, that there was focus on having SMART goals, so simple, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. Two-way family communication, offering multiple advanced course pathways, which is something that we have a MERC study that's wrapping up now that's focused on that, like making sure that your students are on complete Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade. Strategies for recruitment of diverse staff, mental health promotion is a very key focus area right now. And then career and technical education, or CTE, being able to promote those opportunities for students. Okay, so that's our analysis of strategic plans in Virginia and across the country that met those inclusion criteria. And now the part that I'm pretty excited about is what are the trends in public PK-12 education the school district to consider in their strategic plans. And for this, I'm going to hand it over to Fred.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Knapp, for that insightful background. So one of the overarching, or the main overarching question that we wanted to answer in this project was, what trends in public pre-K through 12 education should school districts consider in their strategic plans? And so to help us understand the trends in education that districts should consider in their strategic planning, we looked up Google Trends to see what people are researching, especially when it comes to education. We decided to focus on the last 5 years from 2018 to 2023, as this was recent enough to give us the right information we needed for this analysis. Reviewing emerging trends in pre-K through 12 education over the past 5 years helps us illuminate what educational institutions are grappling with, presenting opportunities for stakeholders to ensure high quality decision making while addressing important concerns locally, statewide, and nationally. So the chart shows the number of term searches related to each respective category over the past 5 years. 0 representing there being no search interest, while 100 representing the highest search interest over the displayed time period. So the first one we want to look at here is mental health. The growing awareness of mental health support needs in pre-K through 12 education has various implications for policy and practice, including strategic planning. The figure, as you can see, depicts Google search trends related to mental health support for students in the US over the past 5 years. We can advance to the next slide to show the graph. So you can note here that within the following figures, 0 represents no search interest, while 100 represent the highest search interest over the displayed period. The figure also indicates an upward trajectory in the number of term searches related to mental health in schools over the past 5 years. Virginia was tied with Kentucky as the ninth most likely state to demonstrate surge interest in mental health supports in schools. So as you look at this data, what do you think this data tells us? Feel free to type your comments in the search, in the chat box. What do you think happened here in 2022 and 2023 with that spike? We'd like for this to be engaging as well. So feel free to share your thoughts and insights there. Yep, definitely right. More awareness, more data from COVID definitely came out. Yep, definitely. What else? Kids went back to school. Definitely. Yeah, schools opened back up. So yeah, you're all right, right? That's what really caused some of those spikes right there. I'm going to turn it over to Lisa now to take it over with school safety.
Thank you, Fred. So school safety is a really complex issue with many facets. Several of the plans we've reviewed highlighted school safety and wellness as one of the themes in their strategies, or a strategic theme. And these showed up in examples like restorative justice. Overall effects of prevention strategies might include areas around emergency preparedness, bullying, school shootings, and the overall well-being of the staff and students. And if you, next slide, please. So as we take a look at the trends here, please, again, feel free and welcome to add to the chat any additional school safety strategies or goals your institutions might be considering. But what we saw here highlighted in the data was that this topic trended really high in 2022. During this year, the US saw some of the highest numbers of school shootings. Cyberbullying was also an issue. And for Virginia, Virginia showed up as being number 7 in the amount of the number 7 of states in that were searching up this topic. And when we went down even a little further, we saw that the Richmond metro area came up as second in searches for this topic. Next slide, please.
Yep, happy to take this one. Teacher and staff shortages, right? I'm sure, I mean, you'll all bear witness that this continues to be a continuing challenging issue here, right? Nationally and also statewide. The chart, as we're going to see, depicts the Google search trends related to teacher and staff shortages in pre-K through 12 schools over the past 5 years. And they run the gamut from, whether it's burnout to lack of support by districts and some of the very challenging experiences that our educators face in schools. They remain persistent, an issue in pre-K through 12 education, fueled by issues of recruitment as well as retention. And this has led to school systems utilizing various methods for bolstering their workforce, including strategies for building a more diverse staff. As you can see, there was a sharp increase in search interest towards the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023 in both the US and Virginia. Within the US, Virginia showed up as the highest interest in this topic. What do we think accounts for this statewide or nationally? Thoughts? Again, feel free to put them in the chat based on what you see. Yeah, I know, right? It's surprising. Yeah. Not sure that Virginia is the only exception here, but certainly we rank them on. Yep, disrespect of teachers, definitely, yeah, rising factor there, right? What else? Lack of support with behaviors. Yep, it's actually one of the projects we're working on here in my doctoral program was exactly about that, right? Lack of support with behaviors, and yeah, someone is saying, wow, right? Yeah, these are really staggering. Too much workload, yeah, for sure, right? Accountability across the board, definitely, right? Some of the issues here that's driving some of these behaviors here. Disrespect, again, coming in from students and parents and teachers feeling like they don't have that support that they need to continue, doing this important work, right? So little autonomy for teachers to do their work, definitely, yeah, definitely one of the reasons here. And the run the gamut, right? The list can go on and on, but these are all drivers, some of the causes why this happens, or this, ranks number one in the nation. Lisa, turn it back to you.
Thank you. So, school cybersecurity. Schools and schools districts have not been immune to the various challenges with cybersecurity. They can all be susceptible to things like phishing attacks, ransomware threats, insufficient data protections. Um, this was one of our emerging themes that also was trending upwards, as the chart will show, especially in Virginia. We see that this is trending upwards. And in fact, just like the slide before, we see that Virginia trended number one in this area of searches around school cybersecurity. And so we were also curious, does anyone feel open to sharing why this might be? Why would Virginia be number one in searching and searches for cybersecurity? Um, Feel free again to put this in the chat, or if anybody feels brave enough to come off mic, we'd also like to hear other voices in the space. But yes, large school districts with many one-on-one programs, cyber attacks, cyberbullying. Interesting, the proximity to the federal government. Yes, that the students having more access to computers, internets without learning about cyber safety. A lot of schools are moving to portions to the virtual learning since we've come out to the pandemic. So all of these are great reasons why we're seeing just this trending, this emerging issue trending high. And I will now pass it back to Fred to talk about artificial intelligence in school.
Yes, thank you, Lisa. Another important topic, right? That's trending in the news outlets is artificial intelligence in school, and this not necessarily only related to schools, but in the workforce, right? What are the potential impacts that AI has? Is it replacing jobs? And we can start to see some of the impacts, right? Whether you go through when you go through your grocery stores, you see less and less people, right, in the checkout lanes being replaced by some of these self-checkout POS, right? So the topic of artificial intelligence continues to be at the forefront of conversations, especially the potential impact it has on the workforce. As you can see here, there is a distinct jump in search interest in 2023. Why do we think? Any guesses why we see this sharp increase here, right there, in 2023? Yeah, Chat GPT, right? And this has sparked a lot of conversations, regarding, whether it's good. I mean, I've seen so many opinions, I've read so many articles, whether it's good, bad, indifferent, right? There's so many thoughts about that. But we expect to see this evolve over the next few years, right, as it gains popularity. But there is currently no uh, data here in Virginia as it relates to other state. But we expect that this will change very rapidly as the topic of artificial intelligence continue to gain popularity. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you. So I don't know about everybody else, but my inbox gets full of invitations to webinars on AI and how that's going to impact education and the work that we do as educators. Education has become more reliant on technology, especially after the pandemic and with greater advances in areas like artificial intelligence. However, these advances also increase schools' vulnerabilities to cyber threats. When our research team analyzed these emerging themes within current strategic plans, we found it very interesting that we saw that there was zero mention of artificial intelligence in schools. And that could be, related to the chart that we saw previously that Fred shared with us, is just that increase of people's interest since ChatGPT. But there was also only 5 mentions of school cybersecurity. So as we were looking at what are emerging trends, it was interesting to see that how these didn't show up as great as some of the areas that were already covered. And that speaks to, as you're thinking about your strategic plans, it will incorporate different themes based on from the ones that you had in the past.
Yeah, and another one that I'm sure we'll all agree with is that topic of diversity, equity, inclusion, right, or DEI. And this is another topic that continues to dominate education policy discussions, and it shows a sharp increase over time in searches for the term diversity, equity, and inclusion. Virginia tends to trend or follow U.S. Trends very closely over time, and within the U.S. we see that, we realize that Virginia ranked number 3, I believe, in terms of search interest, and within the Richmond metro area, it ranked 7th. I mean, the second, right? Ranked number 2. We've done a lot of work with DEI, but there's definitely a lot that's still yet to be done. But it's interesting to see that Virginia ranks very highly, both nationally, and then Richmond very highly when it comes to the Tri-Cities area. Lisa, back to you.
And another emerging issue in public education is social emotional learning. Social emotional learning goes beyond the academic achievements by including the importance of the social and emotional needs of students in the school and classroom environment. In our analysis, the strategic plans, our team saw social emotional learning show up in the areas of goals and strategies, with examples like embedding the 5 C's into the curriculum and implementing more positive behavior strategies. For this topic, Virginia was 33 in the states, the search trends for the states. And as you look at the graph, you'll notice that there are moments where there are significant upticks in the searches, and it sometimes follows what the US is doing, and other times there were areas where they Virginia went out on their own and really was interested in this topic. Some of it might have to do with, since we did see it coming up in those strategic plans and people wanting to focus on that, maybe that was time during when they were putting their plans together. But this is something that is emerging, and the trend for people looking into this is definitely trending upwards.
In recent years, there have been questions about how Americans view the value of a college education for themselves or their children, yet earning post-secondary credentials tends to consistently predict higher earnings over time. The following chart depicts Google search trends related to college preparation and career over the past 5 years within the context of searches related to jobs or education. It also indicates the search interest related to college and career preparation, showing the decrease over the past 5 years. But then it also appears to be increasing over the past 2 years. Career preparation consistently receives less search interest than college preparation over time. But within the US, Virginia ranked 14th in terms of interest related to these two terms. I have a 17-year-old who has one more year before she goes to college. There's a lot of conversation around, college choice. Where do we go? What are some of the things we need to consider, considering the very high price tag, right? That college has here. Why do we see? Well, why do you think there is a sort of a lesser trending when it comes to college preparation as opposed to career preparation? Any thoughts on that? Anything that the data, any picture or anything that the data tells us here? And feel free to put your comments in the chat, or if you want to. Yeah, the national conversation on school debt. Yep.
Hi. So, good
Yeah,
afternoon, everyone.
go
Christina,
ahead.
doc student, former high school counselor, and I helped the Richmond Town Dispatch with an article about this. But the students are listening. They're listening to the national conversation around school debt. They're hearing us millennials, not me though. Your girl did good, but they're hearing this conversation play out, and they're looking for alternative ways. I've been working with students and families looking into the guaranteed transfer programs through our Virginia community colleges. They're looking for other ways to get to other post-secondary options. But yeah, the kids are smart. They're tuned in. They're seeing the stories and listening to the student debt conversation on TikTok, especially just the social media. I think a lot of young people are still very interested in post-secondary education, but they're also seeing their family struggle during the early onset of COVID. And so I think there's a lot playing into how us as America, how our just economy is set up, how our jobs are set up. And I feel like a lot of young people, at least the ones that have shared with me a lot, is like, I want to make sure I have a good, stable job so I can provide. So they are looking, at least my students at Highland Springs High School, they were looking more into like trades, where they can get certifications. And then once again, like I said, dual enrollment options, we had that in Henrico County. So yeah, they were just looking for alternate ways to either lower the cost or postpone maybe that 4-year college degree, but finding ways to get a good job, make decent money in the meantime.
Spot on, Christina. Thank you so much for those valuable insights. You're absolutely right? I mean, even here at work, I talk to some of my colleagues, and asking about the kids, and there are a fair number of them who talked about going or choosing a trade route. The high cost is definitely an option here, right? College prep does not include career prep. That does not equal career prep. Yes, Goochland has a great dual enrollment program, but also a partnership with local companies and trades. So yeah, people are, like you said, Christine Platt, trying to look at the cost here versus the opportunity. What does this really equate to? Is that 4-year degree, that high price tag, truly guarantee success in the career field? Not to minimize college, but these are some of the things that are sparking the conversations when it comes to college and career preparation. So all good points there. Yeah, cultural difference in how we discuss college and career prep, definitely for sure, Dominique. Yeah, all great points there. All right, Lisa, back to you for learning loss.
Before I go, Rachel, you had your hand in. What you can.
Hi.
Do you want to make a point? Great.
Yeah, I currently work at VCU's Child Development Center, but my experience is teaching 4th grade, and more recently, especially since COVID, there has been a really big, I guess, uptick on these influencers on social media, right? So when we talk about just generally talking, what do you want to be when you grow up? More and more I'm seeing I guess, less typical careers that like we
Mhm.
grew up envisioning we would be. I hear a lot more like I'm going to be a YouTuber, like this YouTuber that I follow and watch a lot. So social media I feel like has played a big trend on like the way that children and students now foresee how they can prepare themselves for a potential career in the future.
Rachel, that's a really good point you bring up. You talk about YouTube, and that brought back memories of my 11-year-old son who, has all this, he goes on YouTube and looks up all this cool folks, and he would have the conversation, so and so who is only, 12 years old has 3 million followers. Can you imagine that? And so I can see the influence here, right, that some of these or that social media has when it comes to career options here for sure. I think that's definitely playing an important role there. So there definitely thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, that definitely is a great point in how do we look at career preparation? What careers are included? What options are we giving students? And what how does that attach to a pathway into a higher education? Or does it need to attach to a pathway to a higher education? Great dialogue, great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for the brave ones coming off mic and those who had time to enter stuff in the chat. We definitely appreciate that. And so we come to learning loss. Learning loss was an emerging trend that we've really seen an increase and has become a concern, especially after COVID. But we also know that there's other things impacting students' time in the classroom, whether it was that time during COVID or things like natural disasters, or whatever it is that might be keeping students out and affecting daily time in the classroom. We see from this chart that it definitely spiked and went up as we started going into the pandemic and coming out of the pandemic. And there was an increase. Virginia ranked fifth in the states searching this topic. But as you can see, like throughout the United States, this is a very big topic for school districts to think about and discuss and strategize on how to address this issue. I would love to hear some ideas or hear how learning loss is being discussed at your school district or within your circle of communities. And are there any emerging strategies to learning loss that people are discussing or seeing? And again, feel free to put it in the chat. But if we have some people willing to come off mic, would really like to hear from you on these topics.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, Dominique Chatters, Chesterfield County School Board member. I'm a mom of 4 kids. And so one of the things that we're trying to be accountable for is that learning loss is not new, right? I'm a bit frustrated with the tendency that we tend to blame COVID for learning loss, and that's not an accurate depiction. We were having students that were struggling before COVID. We are, and then when you're absent from school for an extended period of time, virtual learning is not the ideal situation for all students. So that is also part of the problem. But we have to get past blaming COVID or blaming whatever we're trying to blame for it, and then do the accountable thing and the right thing by each individual child, because it's not going to work for all children. And so that takes time and resources that we don't have enough of, right? And so the current strategies in place, in my opinion, are throwing money at a problem, and we just need to apply it properly, right? We have to do something more than just test our students to death to figure out where the gaps are. And I'm looking for innovative, creative solutions other than testing our children to death to figure out where the gaps are and how do we address those.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who might have some suggestions or some strategies other than throwing money at the problem or increasing our testing on students? Things that are coming up in discussions with your colleagues in meetings in with your school district. Yes, Rachel.
I guess this is kind of like if we weren't testing them so much, but as educators, we're always keeping track of data, right? Like we're always tuned in with our students and where they are. So if they take away all the extra testing, it really allows us more time in the classroom, and it allows us more time and the students more time to like engage in the content rather than sitting there and us. I mean, and let's be honest, we're really teaching them to take a test. We're not teaching them to apply any of the concepts when they take the tests, right? At least in my experience. So I feel like, take the testing away, take that, and then hopefully that extra time and space and energy can be given to really support the students where they are and bridge those like gaps.
Thank you. I also want to bring into this space and from the chat, another suggestion was family, school, and community partnerships should be the crux of the solution. Teachers need more time to teach. Actually, letting teachers teach, novel concept. I heard the sarcasm in the chat, but these are definitely some of the ideas and strategies and goals that we hope when you move into your breakout time, you can have some more discussion on.
Yeah, so as we sort of kind of wrap up here with the trends before we turn it over to Dr. Nav, just want to call your attention to just more like a summary, right, of what we've discussed so far. Looking at school safety and learning loss, as we just talked about, as the two most prominently searched terms within the US, Virginia, right? Although in the Commonwealth, social and emotional learning and DI were nearly tied for the second most popular, but as we can tell, there are some really hot button topics of interest here within school safety and learning loss. And sure, these all, will change. These continue to evolve and will change over time, but any thoughts as to where things could go? I know this is a sort of a broad question here, but where do you see things shifting here in the next 5 years, though? I mean, as we looking at what we've talked about and the impacts and what's changing, thoughts on where things could go here in the next 5 years. What do you see coming up more? What do you see kind of taking the back seat, sort of? And feel free to put that in the chat as well. AI, yeah, definitely, right? AI is definitely, I can see as this continues to gain, popularity, I can see AI rising from 1.23%, going all the way up. So yeah, definitely. Anything else that you see changing here on the slide? I know it's kind of hard to predict here, but yeah. Increased focus on mental health support. Definitely, I'm hearing a lot of it in the workplace now as something that's, HR departments are more concerned about giving time, allotting time just for mental health. So definitely, I think that's one that we'll continue to see. Safety, yeah, hoping safety will decrease with better measures in place. Amen to that one. Yeah, that's just, anyone with, school kids is definitely one of those things that we all, you send your kids to school, you pray that they come back home safely. Yeah, definitely safety is a big one. Career prep with rising cost of college. Yep, we'll continue to see that shaping here, the discussion here as the cost continues to go up. But yeah, politics, right? And maybe sure we could talk about that all night, but politics definitely plays an important role here in where things. All good discussions. I want to thank all of those who came up to share and also put that put their comments in the chat. Keep it going. But David, I'm going to hand it up over to you before we sort of break into the chat here. But thanks, you all, for contributing and for coming up with those insightful contributions. Really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred and Lisa, for leading that discussion. I think this is so fascinating, and it sounds like we need to get together 5 years from now and redo these analyses so we check up on our predictions. The chart is potentially going to flip around. So considering everything that we've talked about, we just want to share quickly what are the 5 key takeaways that we think are important for you to understand based on our review of the literature, our analysis of strategic plans, and then our analysis of these Google trends. So we're going to share these 5 takeaways, and we're going to transition into some quick breakout discussions as we wrap up our remaining time together. So what are some of these takeaways? First, it makes sense in terms of academic achievement that school districts should continue to make this a top priority. But it's clear in terms of what the research shows, but also in terms of like opportunity for integrating other components of the strategic plan, that there's an opportunity to consider the SEL connections with academic achievement. And I think like addressing absenteeism is a good example of that, that the best academic interventions that are available aren't going to really be effective for students who aren't having their social emotional needs met or who aren't in school, which is a symptom of social emotional needs. So academic achievement, continue to prioritize it, but sort of consider some of the nuances around what actually contributes to academic achievement. Second, clarifying approach to staffing. So it's pretty common for school districts to have this as a top priority or focus area. It was less common for them to have sharply articulated strategies about how they were actually going to go about improving their staffing needs. So it's important for districts to sharply articulate specific goals and strategies that are going to be taken in order to address teacher and staff shortages, especially if there's plans around diversifying their workforce. So what does that actually look like? How specifically are you going to do that? Is that partnership with local colleges and HBCUs? What are some of the pipelines that you're creating? That sort of thing. Third takeaway is prioritizing student and staff wellness. School districts need to ensure that mental health is represented prominently in strategic plans. So sometimes mental health is subsumed within social emotional learning. Mental health needs its own kind of focus area, we would say. And MERC has a separate study specifically focused on supporting mental health in schools. I'm a former high school counselor, so I have some bias here, but particularly considering the unique challenges that have been faced in terms of mental health since COVID-19, this is something that needs to be specifically prioritized in school division strategic plans. Fourth, stakeholder engagement through data. So anytime that you're engaging in strategic planning, it's important that it's surrounded by data. So school districts should make data-driven decision-making that's central to their strategic planning efforts, and it's important to systematically collect relevant data and present it to their stakeholders in accessible ways. This is something that we do with MERC with some of our school divisions around like stakeholder surveying, building dashboards, things like that, giving people an opportunity to interact with the data. It's a way of kind of democratizing research evidence to, along at the same time, really helping to inform strategic planning efforts. And then finally, fifth, making sure to attend to cybersecurity and artificial intelligence. Lisa and Fred talked about this. And the Google trends, it's something that's a rising need in schools, but none of the school districts that we reviewed their strategic plans mentioned anything about artificial intelligence. And cybersecurity only came up in 5 of the school districts that we reviewed. So as school districts are engaging in strategic planning efforts, it's important to explicitly address these things in their strategic plan. So those are 5 key takeaways. Again, if you're interested in learning more, there's lots more to unpack in the actual research brief. There's a QR code to download it here. That's a QR code to connect with MERC. All of our contact information is there. And then we also have that resource document that has additional information and resources. But we want to wrap up today in our remaining time together to actually have some conversations around what are some of the key issues that you're facing in your school district, and just kind of go through an exercise of how would you articulate this as a priority area, and then what are some of the goals associated with it. And MERC is actually getting ready to select our next topic for our next MERC study. And so this conversation is going to directly inform the conversations that we're going to have with our school division leadership about what are some of the things that we should consider in terms of the next MERC study. So this conversation is going to live beyond this seminar, which is great. And to talk through what we're planning on doing this, I'm going to hand it over to Lisa, who's going to share her screen and talk through what our plan is.
Great, thank you. So as David alluded to, we are going to now invite you to spend some time in some groups. We are going to have 3 groups. And in those groups, we would like you to take some time to engage with each other, the policy brief with Google Trends, to identify any emerging issues that institutions are currently navigating. I'm going to currently share my screen. If I can find the button disappeared on me, sorry. So in the chat, everyone should have access to this document, the MERC seminar resources. In this document, as David pointed, you'll find all of our resources, but what you'll also find is a section on group discussions. We're going, like I said, there will be 3 groups. When you click on that link, it will take you to this document, which will spell out the directions. So once you are in your group, we are recommending that you identify one person who will be open to taking notes, another person who will also be open to sharing out. Could be the same person, could be somebody different. But as you spend time with this document in your groups, you are going to take a look at some emerging issues. If you only get through one, that's fine. We left space for there to be 3. We also provided some shared definitions. So as you're thinking as a group of what are priorities, what are goals, what are strategies, the language is in this document that we're asking you to use as you have this discussion. So again, this resources should be in the chat. Feel free to hop into that. Are there any questions before we move you all to breakouts?
Can you reshare it?
Yes.
Some of us had to switch over from different devices.
Yes, it should be in your chat right now. I just saw it pop in. And either David, myself, or Fred will be in your group to just help a little bit with the facilitating and answer any questions that folks might have. David, how long are we giving people?
We'll do 15 minutes for this.
Okay.
And then come back together.
We'll have the 15 minutes, then we'll come back and we'll like to have a share out. As David mentioned, we're hoping that the information from this discussion will lead to bigger conversations outside of this time. So that's why we're asking people to take notes, have a note taker, and put their information on this document so that could help guide further research and conversations. So if there are no additional questions, I'll give a second. Feel free to hop into your chat. You should see on your screen the option to join, and I'm going to stop sharing so I could see mine. Oh, I think we're all back. Okay, great. Wanted to take an opportunity for group share outs. Do we have someone here from group 1 who would like to report out?
Happy to share from our group, and I guess we can make it really quick because we only have a couple of minutes left. And first, I want to acknowledge that we thank you to everybody who through the group discussions. We had a really great discussion in our group, and the point that was raised that we really kind of unpacked was the need for recruiting and retaining a diverse and high quality teaching and other faculty and staff workforce in our school divisions. And we talked about like what are some of the goals that are specifically related to retaining your staff once they're there, but also from a recruitment standpoint, thinking about this in terms of pipelines from places like the VCU School of Education. How do you actually create some of those pipelines within the training to pre-service educators, teachers, administrators need to be successful in some of these spaces where they're going to be working, but also being mindful of like placing people in context where like students can see people in these positions that reflect their own backgrounds and being really thoughtful of that from a retention or from a recruitment standpoint. So this is something that I know a lot of school districts talk about, but it was brought up in the context of a small rural school division. But I think it resonated with the experience of the folks from larger divisions as well in our group.
Great. Thank you for that, Cheryl. I was in group 2. Definitely want to thank my group mates. It was a great conversation. And we're going to have Jose, who said he can be our reporter.
Sure. Thank you all. Yes, we did have a lively conversation. We did identify 2 sort of important issues or focus areas. We did start with mental health. Where the group identified mental health as a very important priority area, and definitely a growing trend in several divisions. Um, so it's becoming, it's hitting an apex, as it were, in some divisions. We did identify an aligned goal of increasing access to mental health supports for students and staff across all these divisions. And then we jumped to issue 2, which became a large part of our discussion around attendance and how critical attendance is for instruction, school, the community, family. Some aligned goals, or an important goal we identified was to build trusting relationships with families. So, in addition to the student, also that relationship with families is key. Some strategies we did identify for this priority area of attendance. Offering food access to students as a way to have engagement and meet some of those wraparound needs, perhaps, that the community and students need. The importance of data. I know, David, you've mentioned this and your colleagues in your presentation about the importance of data and finding out the real reasons of why perhaps students are not adhering to attendance requirements. So the huge importance of data and finding out really what's going on. Another strategy is making sure that the instruction itself is engaging for the students themselves, and then crucial, having engagement opportunities with families themselves. So not only engaging instruction for the student, but also for the families and parents and guardians. The importance of making sure a strategy is making sure we communicate the importance of school and have the community understand the importance of school. Another strategy for engagement would be offering continuing education for parents to increase that involvement and engagement, and then leveraging collaborations with community partners, for example, businesses or public-private partnerships, maybe around an issue like transportation. And then making sure communication is key, making sure the parents and families are aware of what's going on with their kids. For example, maybe video games or violence, depicted in video games, and kids having video game time and what that might do. So we had a really robust, hopefully group 2, I did justice to that. Our discussion was great.
Yeah, sounds like a really robust discussion there, Jose, that your group had. I'll summarize it for group 3 I was in. We also had some really interesting, good conversation there. With some of the themes there that came up was the chronic absenteeism that seems to be the top issue there as well, and then just the general lack of interest in learning. Right, you have students who are saying, "Well, I don't need to learn. I don't need to go to college. I can go work for my brother's company or whatever." So I think you kind of touched on that in one of the trends there, the college prep conversation versus the career prep conversation. I think that kind of spoke to that there, and the I guess the pressure from the educational leaders to say make them learn, right? We talked about how do you make someone learn who just doesn't, right? It's the difference between a lack of skill and a lack of will. If it's a skill issue, you can kind of help the students there. But if it's a will issue and they're just simply not interested in learning, that is a challenge. So that was discussed as well. So we talked about motivations, and group members did admit that it's not all students, right? There are some students who are interested in learning. There are some who, recognize the efforts that the educators are putting in, and acknowledging them for that. So thank you for what you're doing. There's one who shared that the student went to Cornell and sent a note back thanking them for their support in an operational analysis class, which kind of is heartwarming when you hear that kind of feedback from the students. So I think that feedback helps a little bit. But there are some that are still really severely burned out. There are some that are leaving the field altogether, not really interested in teaching. And I asked, whether there was any retention efforts or attempts at keeping some of these educators in the institutions. But one sure that newer educators or newer teachers tend to get more, sign-on bonuses and stuff versus the existing ones, right? Which kind of creates some, difficulty there. Would you rather have the experienced folks leave or maybe jump from one school to the other? So that was a good discussion that came up. So these are all very good conversation topics that group 3 members talked about. So and that's it. Group 3, hopefully I captured your thoughts well.
Thanks, Fred. And thanks to everybody for joining us today. We've already kept you over. This has been such a great conversation. We've recorded it for folks who weren't able to join us. Please feel free to access and share that resource document in your network. Look at what other groups discussed as well. Same thing with the research report. Please feel free to share that in your networks. And just a quick plug, we really hope to see you at the MERC Summit. If you're interested in talking about any of these topics, we're going to dig into all of these and more, and we want to hear about what you're working on, so please submit a proposal to that. The proposals are open until April 26th. So thank you all for being here. This is great, and we will stay in touch. Take care.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.